Welcome to the Academic Writing Amplified podcast. On this podcast, we believe that the culture of academia needs to change radically. Women and non-binary people are revolutionizing academia within institutions that were not built for us. If you're ready to reject the culture of overwork, kick guilt and overwhelm to the curb, and amplify your voice to make a real impact on your field without breaking down or burning out, you're in the right place. With our team of experienced writing coaches as co-hosts, we'll share insights and talk to inspiring guests to bring you the practical strategies, systems, and mindset shifts you need to find time to write, publish work you love, and design your career on your terms. And it all starts with writing. Let's go. Happy New Year. My name is Kathy Mazak, and I am so happy that you're listening today. Do you think of the new year as a fresh start? Have you reflected on what you learned last year and chosen a direction for 2022? Or maybe you're just ready to close the chapter on 2021 and move on. I totally get that. Well, it might be cliche to talk about fresh starts in the new year, but I'm going to do it anyway. I, every year, reflect on the previous year and kind of set intentions and choose a word of the year for the upcoming year. And I encourage you to do the same. So today on the podcast, I really hope you'll indulge me as I reflect on 2021 and set us up for a new, exciting 2022 on this podcast. So on today's episode, I'm doing a little year in review of some major lessons learned last year. And then I'm going to tell you what you can expect from this podcast and the company that it's created by in 2022. So you might have already noticed some new podcast art and updated podcast introduction. In today's episode, I'll be talking about those changes, how you can expect this podcast to help you publish more in 2022. And please stick around to the end for another update on my book journey. So spoiler alert, you can pre-order it now. And I will tell you all about that at the end of this episode. So let's get started. All right. So let's start with some wins from 2021, one of which is that this podcast turned 2 years old and grew to almost 120,000 unique downloads, which is just amazing to me. And that was a 20% growth over the previous year. So yay. And also, by the way, if you love this podcast, the best thing you can do is to rate it and review it on Apple iTunes. I know, you might not be listening on Apple iTunes, but that is where your ratings and reviews get the most traction for us and help the podcast get into the ears of more people like you. So that is a way to show love to podcasters and to podcasts is by rating and reviewing them on Apple iTunes. Okay, so that was great. Nice podcast growth over the last year and super excited, for what that means for 2022. Another reflection on 2021 or a big win for the year, personally for me, was that I got a book contract and I wrote the book. Yes, I got a book contract and I wrote the book. That was the other part, right? That I wrote it. So again, at the end, I'll be telling you about how you can pre-order it, but I'm really excited because it's done. And I got the interior design just a couple days before Christmas. So it's really, really close to done. It's really going to be out there soon. And actually, when you pre-order it, you can get it like way before everyone else. So I'll tell you more about that at the end. Okay. Another personal highlight of this year that I was really happy about, I was very honored to have been chosen the 2021 scholar for the Helen Glass Research Symposium hosted by the College of Nursing at the University of Manitoba. And I got to deliver a keynote event there about writing and publishing. And that happened because of the podcast. So podcast listener Tina West, shout out to Tina. She was one of the organizers of the symposium. She thought it would be great to have a focus on writing and publishing for their event. And so she worked with me and the committee to bring me virtually to the event and to create kind of like a keynote experience for people. It was more than just an hour talk. It was more workshop-y. And it was really great. So because I had such a great experience doing that, I just want to say out loud that if you would like for me to come to your campus virtually or otherwise and do a keynote event or a workshop, if your school's interested, then just write to us at writing@kathymazak.com and we can see if we can make that happen in 2022. I have one of my goals for 2022 is to do more of those keynotes. So looking forward to exploring that and meeting just more people at more universities like I did at University of Manitoba. So that was amazing. Then there's like some other stuff that happened in 2021. It was a really, really hard year. So if you're listening for the first time, hello, welcome to our podcast. This podcast is created by, a business that sells professional development programs for academics. And so one of the things that I do, what I do in the business is right now I'm the CEO of that business. So we went through a really rough time in 2021. Our business did. So we had grown to a team of 8 people plus myself, so 9 in total, with the idea that bringing on more people was going to help us enroll more people in our programs, and that kind of bringing in more staff, because we did all feel kind of overworked, right? Like bringing in more staff was going to help us also bring in more clients for our writing and publication focused professional development programs. But that's not how it works. Apparently, as I'm learning to be a CEO. It's not how it worked out. So then I had to fire people, which sucked. So I had to painfully let go of people. So now, basically, like if you're interested in business, we grew our marketing team and then we basically had to let them go because we couldn't sustain their salaries with the enrollment that we had. And it's not that we had bad enrollment. We had great enrollment. We actually enrolled more students this year or more clients in more programs this year than we did in 2020, but it wasn't enough for the kind of like personnel growth that we were trying to have. So we are back to being a team of 5 and it's great. It was hard. So a lot of kind of growing pains of the business and growing pains for me as a CEO. But after getting through that bottleneck this summer, we've come out kind of smaller, but stronger and more focused than we ever have before. So what we had to do to keep the company afloat and to create and deliver the most outstanding professional development programs for you all was to simplify. So this became our company's word of the year. About midway through 2021, we switched our word of the year. My original word of the year for 2021 was foundation, because I wanted to build like a really strong foundation for our company to grow. But instead, what we need, and it's not like we didn't do that. We certainly did. But we really need to focus on simplifying, because with fewer hands to do the work, we needed to make everything simpler. And I really started thinking a lot from the program's perspective, because our program team changed in terms of the number of hours people were working, but it didn't change in terms of the people, except we actually added somebody who I'll tell you about later. But from the program's perspective, it was also like we need to simplify our programs and the delivery of our programs so that we can deliver them more efficiently, and so that each aspect of each program is more effective. So we were simplifying from the marketing and sales side. We were simplifying from the program side. And that really became like our word of the year in the summer of 2021. And it has served us really, really well to make changes based in our values as we head into 2022. So one of those changes that you may have noticed was that we closed the I Should Be Writing Facebook group. So if you've listened to earlier episodes of this podcast from, 2019, especially, you'll hear me asking you to go and join the I Should Be Writing Facebook group. Well, y'all did, and that group grew to about 16,000 people in 2021. So as you can imagine, it was a lot of work to manage it, which is not even the biggest deal, because if it was a lot of work to manage and it had like all of these benefits, we would have kept it. But we just couldn't as the story of Facebook and where Facebook has decided as a company to go kept evolving in 2021. I just couldn't stay there. I couldn't ask 16,000 people to hang out on Facebook to make their writing better. It didn't make any sense. It was a big conflict in company values because not only are Facebook's company values not our company values. So I don't want to get all into the details of that, but you can imagine, right? With all this stuff that's come out about Facebook. And I just no, it's not, that's not something I want to participate in anymore. So we stopped running Facebook ads and we decided to close the I Should Be Writing Facebook group. And even our Momentum program, which we've redesigned for 2022, instead of using a Facebook group, it uses now Slack, which is not a social media program. It is a messaging program. So basically it's free to people who use it, but we pay for it. But it's a more kind of text-based and channel-based communications tool. So we use it on our team. So we decided to use that for our programs as well. So we don't have any programs that require you to be on Facebook anymore. I mean, it's just if you need to write and publish, we just decided that the experience of Facebook is in conflict with the thoughtfulness and focus that we're trying to help our audience cultivate so that they can write and publish. So it's just not the right platform to connect meaningfully with academics about writing and publishing. But this podcast is exactly the appropriate platform for that. So the exchange that we have on this podcast, where it feels really intimate for you, and it feels intimate for me too, actually, and for those of us recording the podcast, it feels like we're creating something for you and then having this almost one-on-one experience with you as you listen in your earbuds, right? That seems much more conducive to writing. And then the community and sharing and diversity of community is part of our company values. But Facebook community does not mean community in the sense that we're talking about in our values. We develop community inside of our programs. Yes, we have now we have Slack. We're using Slack for asynchronous community, but we don't. And that's not where the real sparks of community happen when you really develop relationships with people. You develop relationships with people in our programs, in group coaching calls, in co-writing sessions where you see the same people every week and you know what their goals are and they know what your goals are, in the virtual retreats that we do, in workshops that we put on. So that's where we're really developing community. And we just decided with that word of the year in our mind, simplify. We decided let's simplify. Let's go all in on the podcast and all in on community development inside of our programs. So that's what we decided to do for 2022, which brings me to some awesomeness that's going to be happening in 2022. So much of it has to do with this podcast. I'm very excited to share with you. All right. The most important change to the podcast in 2022 is that you're going to be hearing multiple hosts. So if you'll indulge me, I'd love to give you a little history of this podcast in order to give this change some context. I founded a writing coaching company as a side gig in February of 2017. For the first 2 years of the company, I worked as what you would call a solopreneur. So I wrote my own blog about academic writing. I created all the coaching programs and courses for academics myself. I ran all the programs myself, but then I had the help of back end support, like a social media manager, somebody to help me post the blog posts and stuff like that. But front end, in terms of programs that I delivered all the coaching, I delivered all the programs, I created all the content. Then in the summer of 2019, I ran my first cohort of our Amplify pre-tenure program. And I knew, that I couldn't do it by myself anymore. And I didn't want to either. It was okay, now it's time to bring in more coaches and more people to deliver the programs. And that was the summer when Gina Robinson and Rocio Caballero Gil joined me as coaches on our team. Gina was a tenured professor and Yale grad in Spanish literature who had gotten out of academia and was working for the Vermont Humanities Council when she started working with us for just 10 hours a week. And Rocio was a geoscientist and Brown grad who had co-founded a professional organization called GeoLatinas to support Latinas in the geosciences. And I was so amazed that the internet helped us come together, right? And they started out just working a few hours a week, helping to host the Amplify group calls. But of course, over the years, their roles in the company grew and grew. But this podcast, which was founded actually in September 2019, soon after they came on board, didn't incorporate them in any kind of regular or meaningful way. Sometimes they would come on and we would talk. They would have a 3-way conversation. They were guests on the podcast in the summer of 2020. So you can go and listen to their episodes and hear much more about their history as academics and their present as academics in Rocio's case. But it was still the podcast still all this time has really been a solopreneur podcast. It's really been Kathy's podcast. So looking back, I think that I made that choice because I really didn't know what else to do. So having coaches working with me was new, and it's taken a long time to go from having this company that was really just me to now having this company that we are a team of people who are co-creating. And for me to understand what that meant, to let go enough to allow the co-creation to happen and allow Gina and Rocio to be leaders in the creation of programs, it was a struggle for me to figure out how to do that and how to ask for that from them. They wanted to do it, but it's it's hard. It's being a CEO and creating a company out of nothing. There's no blueprint or roadmap for it. So, you're figuring it out all the time. So, I didn't have them as a major part of the podcast when I launched it. Part of it too was not knowing what was going to happen to the company. In 2019, the company was only 2 years old, and who knew if it would last, right? Who knew if it would survive? So, it was this kind of struggle. And though I was off in my corner doing the podcast, they were delivering mostly the programs. And now it's time to kind of bring those things back together. So Gina and Rocio weren't just helping me implement programs. We were co-creating the programs together. So then last summer, another coach, Thea Racelis, joined our team. And she has added to this process of co-creation with her background in trauma response and her ability to hold space for clients. That's one of her all of our coaches do that really well. And Thea just really has this ability to kind of hold a space and ask really great questions, along with an expertise in teaching writing. So Thea came onto the team, and now we have this really dynamic group of the 4 of us creating programs together and creating customer experiences and client experiences together. So all of this to say that a podcast with one host, me, and a company that is literally called Kathy Mazak LLC no longer reflects reality. To continue to operate with me as the center of the podcast and me with my face all over the website and the programs appearing to be all me on the marketing side, but then on the delivery side, they're definitely us. It just doesn't acknowledge how the creation of the work is happening. So it's not acknowledging your co-authors, right? It's I'm publishing something and I'm not giving credit to my co-authors. So for this reason, we're starting to project outwardly what has been happening in the company inwardly. So you're going to see these changes first with changes to the podcast. So you'll hear Gina, Rocio, and Thea hosting their own solo episodes and interviews soon. So by soon, I mean February, March, that's when we're really going to ramp that up because we're all, we're planning the year, making sure that they know what content they're going to create and they have time to prepare and record. So that is a really exciting change coming. And that's why we changed the intro to the podcast, right? To include everybody. And it's going to be so much great value about writing and publishing for all of you because, I always say that my coaches are better coaches than I am. So you're going to get to hear the different kinds of advice, the different styles of coaching and thinking around academic writing and publishing that this whole team of people who, for their job, what we do is we work with academics trying to get their writing and publishing done and trying to grow their careers. And so we can offer like a unique perspective because we all were and/are academics. And we work with so many academics across so many different fields, so many different career moments to write, publish, and grow their careers. So that is a really unique perspective that we can offer on this podcast. And I think it's really going to help you publish more in 2022. So that is our intention behind the podcast for 2022. Also, we are changing the name of the company from my personal name to a name that reflects who we are. Now, more on that name in a later episode because we're still picking it, but you're going to start seeing much less of just my face everywhere and more of our faces, including on the website and in the podcast art. So I want to talk a little bit for a moment about why we changed the name of the podcast. So previously, the podcast had been called Academic Women Amplified, and now it is called Academic Writing Amplified. So that might seem like a strange change because we are definitely still focused on, we definitely have the feminist perspective that the old name implies, but we wanted to change it because we want the title of the podcast to reflect who we really serve. And women is actually like limiting that. So as a company, we feel that it's extremely important for listeners to know that we are talking to women and non-binary academics. So here's why. Saying just women reinforces an artificial binary of men and women, right? And we know that that is not the reality of gender. And so it's silly to me to continue to just always say women. We want to say very specifically what we mean. And what we mean is women and non-binary academics. We mean not men, but we don't want to say not men all the time because, not is negative and we don't want to give men that much airtime. We really want to just like focus on this intersectional feminist kind of perspective that we take in our work. So we also want to make sure that like we're signaling to people who might want to listen to this podcast that trans women are women and that gender is also not a binary. So can men listen to this podcast? Of course, but it is created to speak directly to women and non-binary people in academia. So we want to be really precise about that. And of course, we can't make the name of the podcast, that's too many words for a podcast title. So we decided, well, let's make it Academic Writing Amplified because that's what we're trying to do is amplify your academic writing. And I'm going to talk about the word amplify in a second. But also, it also makes us a little more searchable. So more people will be able to find us. So when you put academic writing into the search bar in iTunes or a podcast app, you should get us as one of your first podcasts that comes up. But really, like we wanted to move away in all of our marketing from just saying women and saying women and non-binary academics everywhere. It's a better description of who we are trying to serve and who we actually serve right now. So a note about amplify in the title, Academic Writing Amplified. I want to give you a little history of that word so that it helps you understand what we're trying to do on the podcast. The intent behind the choice of the word amplified, right? Academic writing amplified, is to make your voice louder in academia through publication. However, There's a secret meaning behind this choice as well. So if you're a longtime listener of this podcast, you might know some of my own backstory. My husband is Puerto Rican. We've lived in Puerto Rico with our 3 kids for over 15 years. All the kids were born here. And we are a bilingual family. So the word amplify has this Spanish cognate, which is like sometimes a false cognate, amplio. And that means something really different than amplify in English, right? So amplify in English means like bigger or louder, get bigger, make bigger or make louder. In Spanish, amplio means or has an additional meaning of spaciousness and comfort, right? So a space can be amplio, and that means that it feels comfortable and is kind of like there's breathing room there. So when we talk about academic writing amplified, to me, this means both making your voice louder through publications and doing so with spaciousness. No one would ever get that from just hearing the title of the podcast, but I wanted you all to know that amplified was very intentionally chosen. We want your voice to get bigger, but not by working more hours or driving yourself into the ground. We truly want you to have it all. More influence on your field, more control over your career, and a relationship to your work that recognizes your humanity and emphasizes your need for restoration and spaciousness. So one last note about titles and names, like you'll see, and some people ask us about this sometimes, so just wanted to say this out loud on the podcast. And you'll see that we spell women with an X, WOMXN. The purpose of that is not to cross out men. So some people read that as like, you're Xing out men. It's like, that's not really what we mean by it. Like that kind of alternative spelling is right now for us. The reason behind that choice is to signal our alignment with intersectional feminism and to tap into the history of that term that comes out of intersectional feminism. But we also know language changes. And so we might not always be doing that, because if it comes to mean something else or another term comes out that we like, we might use that. So just wanted to let you know that that's like why we make that choice. And I explain more about that in my book as well. So anyway, if any of this seems sudden to you, like, why are you saying non-binary all the time? You weren't saying that a year ago or whatever. If it seems sudden to you, it's really because you're seeing like the outer manifestation of work we've been doing inside the company for over a year. So we've been using women with an X and saying women and non-binary people in our messaging increasingly in the last year. We continue to refine how we talk about gender. And we, again, know that language changes and is always developing. So there might be a point that we make different choices about how we spell women, for example, but this is what we're doing right now. And I wanted you to know the reasons that we're doing it. All right. So before we kind of move on to a couple of other fun and exciting changes coming up in 2022, I want to tell you just at least a little bit more about each of the podcast hosts that you're going to be hearing. So Gina Robinson is our head coach and programs manager. And Gina, I really feel like she has like a true calling as a coach and content creator. She was a tenured Spanish professor and then got out of academia because she just decided it was not worth the kinds of things that she was going through, and took a job as a program manager, a program creator for the Vermont Humanities Council. And then that's when I met her, and she came in and started working with us for just a few hours a week. She's grown into a full-time role. I can't even think of how long she's been full-time with us now. And now what Gina does, besides creating amazing program experiences for you all, is that she actually helps create the content of the programs. So in 2021, we decided that our Amplify program, which was a year-long tenure prep program, we wanted to change it to be a 6-month program. And so when we did that, we changed some of the format of it. Like the content of the program previously had been kind of recordings of live workshops that we had given before. So we decided to kind of make them all natively recorded content so that the program has this static recorded content that is dripped out over the 6 months. And then it has the dynamic coaching experiences that are part both one-on-one coaching and group coaching throughout the 6 months of the program. So Gina and I create that recorded content together. And this year's version of that is kind of like the first version. And then we'll have Thea and Rocio come in and help us analyze and evaluate how we did. Also, we finally in our program set up written outcomes, and we are assessing the programs against the outcomes. And so we're doing true like program assessment and improvement, which we have never had the bandwidth to do before. But since we simplified so much, now we have the bandwidth to be able to do that in our programs. So that's part of what Gina does here. And also Gina is just such a good coach. Like she just like has this way of asking really good questions, posing things. I mean, one of the best things about all of our coaches is the ability to ask a great question. And I think that's why I say that I think our coaches that Gina, Rocio, and Thea are better at that than I am, actually. I'm much more of like teachery style, and they are much more coaching style, like asking good questions which is what a coach should do to help you realize what's going on and know that you have the answers inside of you. So that's my little introduction to Gina. You'll be hearing more solo episodes from her as we move on through the year. Rocio is our resident scientist. She's also really, I think of her so much as an activist and a leader in the geosciences, where, she co-founded this professional organization, which she's been developing called GeoLatinas. And it's a global professional organization that connects geoscientists around the world. And it spans over both industry, so geoscience is working in industry, and academics. And it is for anyone who is supportive of Latinas in geosciences. So it's a really diverse group. And like I said, global. And the way that she has been able to develop that, like I think that Rocio's special magic is all about community and developing communities. And she really had such a big hand in developing our Momentum program, which was such a community-focused program. We're just so fortunate to have her special talents on our team, in her community building, in her professionalism and professional development. And now she's working, her full-time job is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. She also is a big grant getter. So we have that insight that she offers to our clients about looking for and getting grants. And also she's just great. So that's Rocio. You'll be hearing more from her in the year. And then Thea is our newest coach, but I have known her the longest. So Thea, actually, I met her in my first couple of years teaching at University of Puerto Rico in Mayagüez, where she was a master's student. She was just always tough, but also thoughtful. And that was my impression of her when I met her, gosh, 15 years ago or something. And then, I've been kind of following her in her career as she's gone on. She got a master's in divinity and was a pastor. She moved kind of all around. She also she got a master's in curriculum. And I noticed on Facebook one day, see, here's a good thing about Facebook. I noticed on Facebook one day that she was leaving her current position wherever she was working. And I just sent her a little message. I'm like, you ever think about this? Here's a job description. And she came on guns blazing, I'm ready. I'm rip roaring, ready to go here. And just has brought this other layer of coaching expertise. If you can imagine the way that a pastor needs to hold a space and the way that a pastor needs to help people deal through trauma, she brings all of that in, but with this academic bent. And so it's really a unique combination of skills. Through her work as a pastor, she has been trained in trauma response. And that's something that we increasingly noticed in our programs, was that we had people who in our coaching calls were actually talking about trauma that happened to them, either through for example, a health problem that then at work they weren't allowed to talk about, or that they were, excluded from things at work or penalized somehow for having a health problem that was not under their control. So that can lead to like a trauma. That's trauma for the health problem and also then trauma for having to like hide it. And also we know about, of course, academic bullying and all that kind of stuff. And it seems like bullying seems like not even the appropriate term, like it's worse than that. So we had been looking for a way to include like somebody who knows more about that than me and Gina and Rocio, and with some training there. And Thea was just like the perfect person to add. She also like doesn't let you get away with any crap. And so like I feel like she's really good at like, because she's new, she can see things that we've been doing. And she's like, you can't do this anymore. You have to change this, and just like, yeah, we didn't see it that way. We've been, it's such a nice, like fresh eyes. And also like, she just like, will come in and deal with the situation. So she has this like combination of like toughness and also this ability to like truly comfort and be thoughtful that is just, I admire it really because of the boundaries she's able to hold. And I think that that's a really amazing, she's an amazing person to be around. So, and I know specifically from comments I've gotten from our clients that, she has the ability to like reflect back. And all of our coaches do this, but specifically there was a really great moment this year that one of our clients said, like, Thea just was able to capture what I was feeling at the moment and articulate it when I couldn't. And so it really helped me understand how I was reacting in that situation. And that's what you want a coach to do. So I hope that those little descriptions make you excited about hearing more from our whole team as hosts of the podcast instead of just me. All right. So I just want to talk a little bit about changes in our program offerings before I get to the information about how you can get your hands on my book first before anybody else. So this podcast is the outreach arm of our company. So you're going to hear us talk about our programs on this podcast occasionally, but please know that this podcast is free. It is our outreach offering to all of you and where we are putting resources into helping everyone who wants to hear it to write and publish more. So it is free. I think it's really helpful. I think that you can get a lot of benefit. And I've heard this too from listeners say, I took something you said on the podcast and I went and did it and it made everything so much better. So that is what we are trying to do. And also for those of you who choose to work with us more deeply, we want you to know that we have programs. But I also want you to know that you can always go ahead and like, just use the little fast forward button. When we start talking about our programs, if you don't want to hear about it, then just like skip right past, which you can do right now. If you don't want to hear about what I'm going to talk about, the update for our program, just go ahead and skip. It's totally fine. It's a podcast. I can't tell what you're skipping. So you can hear about it. You cannot. Something I love about podcasting is that like, I'll just fast forward right through the ads. It's no problem for me. So I just want you to know that you have total permission to only consume our free content and just fast forward through anything that feels like, is talking about programs that you don't want to do. That's totally, totally fine. All right. So for those of you who didn't fast forward through this part, in 2022, we're becoming super focused on women and non-binary professors in our program offerings. So professors being the key word here. So that doesn't mean that if you're a graduate student or a postdoc or an adjunct professor, because to me, adjunct professors are professors, that this podcast is not for you. Okay, that's not what that means. It doesn't even mean that our programs aren't for you, which I'll explain in a minute. But our company had, as I mentioned before, a bit of a rough year in 2021. And we realized that we had to make some big shifts in order to stay afloat financially. So just like in our programs, we teach you how to have an academic mission statement as a way to focus your career and help you make decisions about your time. We had to do the same thing. We had to focus and make sometimes hard decisions about what we were doing and who our programs are focused on, right? So we had to focus our program offerings more narrowly on professional development programs for professors. So right now and in 2022, we offer 3 programs. Navigate is our flagship publication program for all women and non-binary professors. And that is where we teach you how to, I want to say, double your publication output in a year. It's a year-long program. It does involve group coaching, but as we say, it's group coaching at scale. So we use the breakout room feature. There's not a coach in every room, but there's a coach leading the call. You break out, you come back. And then we also have these check-in points where we check in with you by email around 5 key program milestones that are going to make sure that you are moving ahead through the program and accomplishing your program goals as you spend a year writing and publishing more, really transforming how you approach your writing, which will have the result of publishing, we think, twice as much as you've published before. But, you're going to meet your publishing goals when you take our Navigate program. And we have different touch points in there to make sure that that happens for you. And then we have our Amplify and Elevate programs. And Amplify and Elevate are, we always talk about writing because that's our thing, but they're really more career development programs for pre and post tenure professors. So Amplify is for our pre-tenure or early career professors, and Elevate is for our post-tenure or mid-career professors. Now, we do serve professors from around the world, so the word tenure may not apply to your specific situation. That doesn't mean that we don't welcome you into the program. We have plenty of clients in Europe and other, throughout the world where they don't use the word tenure. But what we found from working with those clients is that it's the same set of problems. That early career, mid-career, that in the States and Canada, we mark with pre and post tenure. It's the same set of problems, or very similar enough that the programs are helpful no matter where you are in the world. So those are our 3 programs. Navigate, which is a year-long our flagship publication program. That's the program we kind of, encourage everyone to do. And then for those who want to work more closely or want to have a one-on-one component, want to have a group coaching call, that both those programs, you meet with a cohort and a coach, and the cohorts are small, 10, 12 people max. And then you kind of go through the 6 months of the program with that cohort together. And so with that 12 people together. And so you really develop these peer relationships, peer mentoring relationships that are really powerful. So if you want that level of support, then we encourage you to try Amplify or Elevate. So those are our 3 programs. What happened to Momentum? So if you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know that we had a program called Momentum that was more for everyone. So everyone being grad students, and everyone could join it. We have closed new enrollments in that program, and we are basically reconfiguring how the components of that program fit into Navigate, Amplify, and Elevate. The people who are already in can stay in until, for all of 2022, basically. But after that, we're not enrolling new clients into Momentum. So instead, other things are happening with Momentum, kind of more integrating it with our other programs. So it hasn't disappeared, but it is not open for enrollment now. That way we can really focus on Navigate, Amplify, and Elevate. So we get asked all the time for programs specifically for graduate students, for dissertation writing programs, or programs specifically for postdocs. So we've made the choice in 2022 to focus on assessing, developing, and improving our 3 core writing programs, right? Our 3 core writing, publication, and professional development programs, because that's what they really are. Navigate, Amplify, and Elevate, rather than on creating new programs for new kind of demographic groups. So if you're a grad student who's listening to this podcast, that's amazing. And you should continue listening to this podcast. You should come to all of our free webinars on things that we do. But just know that our programs are for when you're at a different career stage. For now, what we realized in 2021 was that we can't spread ourselves thin. We need to stay small in staff, right? So I told you a lot about our the 3 coaches who work with me in programs. And then we have 2 full-time people who you don't normally see, right? The behind the scenes people. And that's Paulette, who's our operations manager, and Julia, who is our writer/content manager. So they help me on like the back end things. And we have, of course, our fantastic podcast production team. But that's it. Like there's nobody else. So we can't offer a huge slate of programs because we're just too small, and we need to stay small and focused and really make these professional development programs for professors totally amazing so that they can grow. And maybe eventually we will offer programs for graduate students or specifically for postdocs or something. But for now, we really need to focus on professors and make our programs just absolutely amazing so that we can create a sustainable business. Because we don't want to recreate, this is really important, we don't want to recreate structures of oppression. We don't want to recreate, like, when you make a business, right, you're making an institution. And so we don't want to create an institution that promotes overwork, right? I think if you asked our coaches and if you asked our team, they would say that we don't overwork, and when something happens and somebody has to miss something, we either one of us fills in or we just say, I'm sorry, we have to cancel this, we'll reschedule. Like, we are not about recreating the patriarchal crap that is part of so many workplaces. So we don't want to spread ourselves thin. We don't want to micromanage people's hours. We do not do that. We really think that everybody needs to have space and spaciousness in their calendars. They can't be overscheduled. They need space to think. And that's really important for us. So if we started adding more programs and adding and spreading our team thin, if we hired more people, we probably wouldn't be able to financially sustain that. And if we took on too much work, then we would all be overworked. And that is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is really create a fabulous place for people to work, because we know that that's going to make the absolute best program experiences for you. And the best podcast for you, the best free podcast for you will also be made by people who have had time to really think and come up with ideas and, draft. And, that's part of what we want to create. So we're not about overextending ourselves. So in order to help that and support that, we really need to focus on developing programs for one audience. And that audience is ambitious and exhausted women and non-binary professors. Okay. So having said that, we are also not trying to replicate exclusionary oppressive practices either. So we don't check anyone's credentials before they enter our programs. For Amplify and Elevate, we do ask you to complete a program application. And in there, we do ask your career stage, but we're not gatekeeping. We're trying to make sure the program fit is right. And the way we think about program fit is that the problems you're experiencing right now, which program is going to help you solve those problems the best? So because of that, we have had postdocs take Amplify. We have a postdoc in Amplify right now. We've had pre-tenure professors take Elevate because the problems they were experiencing were not Amplify problems. They were Elevate problems. And so we enrolled them in Elevate. And we've had graduate students take Navigate. So it's really more about where you are in your career than it is about credentials. And so again, you might think, oh, they're creating programs only for professors and that's exclusionary. I hope that this explanation helps you to understand, why focus, right? Why would we focus on creating programs for professors? Well, this is the sweet spot that we're in right now. And maybe in the future, we'll have programs for other groups of people, but maybe not too. There are so many great dissertation coaches out there. There's so many great programs for supporting you in your PhD. So we don't have to be that. There's other businesses that can take care of that. There's other support structures that can take care of those things. We don't have to do everything. And I want you to take that same thought and apply it to your career. You don't have to do everything. You can focus, you can narrow, you can niche down. And when you do that, you will be more effective and less stressed and more space and have more spaciousness to make decisions and to be creative because you've become more focused and because you've become, like I said, niche down or you have that academic mission statement and you're really working on that thing. So that's something I want everyone, to be thinking about. So if you're not ready to join a program, again, we invite you to participate as much as possible in the free workshops, in listening to this podcast, of free downloads that we offer, like all of that stuff. Just do it. Just do all of it and never join a program. It's totally fine. But I'm excited about where we're going with programs in 2022 because it's really going to be about making the programs better and better and better and better. And I'm just really, really excited about that. All right. You made it to the end of the episode. Whew, this has been long. So finally, let me give you a book update. All right. So here's how the book is going. I have in my hands the interior design that I need to approve by Friday. And the interior design means the layout, the fonts that the title's written in, the call out boxes and what everything looks like. So I'm going to do a read. I'm printing it out. I'm going to do a read of the whole thing and just make sure there's no huge weirdnesses, because after I approve it, then it's basically going to you really can't change major things. You can still fix typos and page proofs. This is not page proofs. This is interior design. So the interior design of the book is done. Once I approve it, they will then send me page proofs. I'll proof the page proofs and then it will be ready. And so I can have books in my hand in January, paper books in my hand in January. And my plan, actually, to be completely transparent, is to send them to universities that I would like for them to invite me to come do keynotes. So if you are listening and you are interested in that, please send us an email at writing@kathymazak.com. But also, the ebook will be available through me. So through me and what I'm about to tell you, the ebook will be available as soon as the page proofs are done, pretty much. So the latest it will be is May. The official release of the ebook is May. So what we're telling people is you can pre-order it and you'll at least get it by May. But I'm pretty sure that you're going to get it in February or March. So if you want to get the ebook before anybody else, you can buy it directly from me and you can be the first to get it. And we're offering a special bonus that if you pre-order the ebook in January, then you are going to get invited to a special free workshop that we're doing. So the book is called Making Time to Write. And the idea of this book is that you could read it in a weekend. It's only going to be 150 pages long. I want it to be super readable and accessible. And it is going to have a digital workbook that if you buy it through me, you can get the digital workbook. So that is coming soon as well. As soon as the ebook comes out, if you pre-order the ebook, we'll be sending you the digital workbook that goes along with it. So there's a lot of mindset in it, but there's also techniques, there's exercises. It's really about making time to write. So I think that if you like this podcast, you're going to love this book. The paperback book is going to be in stores in August, and the ebook is going to be on sale that you can buy it from the publisher and from Amazon and stuff in May. But you can pre-order from us because I get copies first. So we've already had a ton of people pre-order the book. It's $9.99 to pre-order it. And yes, what I'm saying now is absolutely time sensitive. So this episode should be coming out on the 11th of January. And in 1 week from today, on the 18th, I will be doing a live publication webinar for everyone who has pre-ordered the book. So only for people who have pre-ordered the book. So you've got a week to pre-order it. The link's in the show notes. Go do your pre-order, and then you get an invitation to our live webinar a week from today. In that webinar or workshop, I'm going to be talking about how a writing plan, so how creating a plan for your writing is going to help you get published. So I'm going to talk about 3 stages of writing planning and how they lead to publication. So I did a kind of draft version of this workshop before the holidays, and we had about 70 people come. I'm updating it for this version in January, on January 18th. So pre-order the book to get your special exclusive invitation to that publishing workshop, and I will see you there. Meanwhile, I really encourage you to think back on 2021. Think about what your career was like. Think about what your writing was like, and just observe it with no judgment, right? Think about things that were great, maybe think about things that were not so great, just like I did in this episode. And then cast your vision for 2022. Actually, I think that this workshop we're doing in a week, it will totally help you with that. So if you pre-order the book, you can come. Cast that vision, make that plan, decide what you want your career to look like, because when you do that, then you can go out and achieve it. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time supporting yourself and your writing by listening to this episode. If you like what you heard today, the best way to say thank you is to hop on over to Apple iTunes and write an honest review. The more reviews, the more amazing academic women and non-binary people will find this podcast. So go write one now.